Hello folks, this is Pablo from Masters in Trading. Today I'm going to cover a topic that has nothing to do with trading or the tools or anything like that. It's about how to tune your computer so that you can properly run the tools without running out of resources. So the first thing that we're going to do is we would like to check our computer to make sure that we have enough resources. Critical resources in the computer that we will need is plenty of RAM and a decent processor. If those terms sound foreign to you, don't worry, we'll go over that. So those are the two main components. If you have a graphics card, that is helpful, but you don't necessarily need a dedicated graphics card. How do we go about checking our system resources? The easiest way to do that I know is going to any Explorer window. Open up your Explorer window, go to this PC or my PC, right click on it, go to Properties, and now what we want to look for is the RAM and the processor, which are right here. In my case, I'm running an Intel Core i7 and I have 64 gigs of RAM. I would not suggest running Thinkorswim on a computer that has 4 gigs of RAM. 8 gigs of RAM is pushing it, because Thinkorswim will easily eat up more than half of that. So the higher the better. And as far as the processor goes, if you see i7 or i5, you're good to go. So from a systems perspective, these are the two things that you should look at. Okay, now let's move on to actual Thinkorswim settings. We would like to then find where our Thinkorswim is installed in our computer. I have a shortcut of Thinkorswim here on my desktop. I'm going to right click on it, go to Properties, and the thing I would like to find is this: Start in C Program Files x86/Thinkorswim. So I'm going to take this and copy it, Control C, I'm pressing Control C, or right click on it and click copy, and then we open up our Explorer window and paste that here. We could do it that way. There's many other ways to do it, but that's just one of the ways. I think I didn't like the fact that it had the quotes. There's a folder called User GUI. You can delete this. If you're having performance issues, get rid of it. There should be an error. If you've had any errors, there should be a file called errors. You can delete that one. So if you don't have an errors file, that's fine, but get rid of User GUI. Okay, with that out of the way, and by the way, what the effect that this has is that the next time we launch Thinkorswim, it's going to have to re-download all of the different modules that it uses, and it'll grab fresh ones. So if you have an outdated version, this will ensure that it gets updated. Now we move on to this one, which is probably the most important one and the most complicated one to do, is to modify the amount of RAM that we allocate to Thinkorswim. So let's try doing it. By launching Thinkorswim. This is one way to do it. Let's launch Thinkorswim, and as you see, it says installing updates. By the way, you can double click error while updating GRE. Sorry, this is not the actual Thinkorswim I use. I use this one down here. So I'll just, to prove to you that you can in fact delete that user GUI. and launch it. It says installing updates. If you click on installing updates, you're going to see the progress. It's going to be re-downloading everything again, all of these modules. So this may take a bit of time depending on your internet connection. Notice that on my other installation of Thinkorswim, it doesn't say x86, it just says program files. So I happen to have two different installations of Thinkorswim on my computer that I use for multiple different things. But yeah, I guess this is an old one. I don't know if you noticed some of the dates of the files that were in there. They haven't been touched in several months to a year. So once this gets done, there's a menu that will pop up. Okay, now it's done. There's this little gearbox right here. Click on it. By the way, yours may not actually be displaying this. This was a setting that I changed, but just go ahead and click on this gear. And right here where it says memory usage, you should adjust this from the defaults. In my case, I put right here 1024, and right here I put 576. What this means is that at minimum, I'm giving Thinkorswim 1 gig of RAM, and at a maximum, I'm letting Thinkorswim use 24 gigs of RAM. Remember earlier that I said RAM is very, very important. So in my case, when I'm running Thinkorswim fully loaded with all my stuff open, it's easily eating away at 12, 13, 14 gigs of RAM. So if your computer only has 8 gigs of RAM, but what you're trying to do on Thinkorswim requires 12 gigs of RAM, it's going to slow it down, as you could imagine. So I would suggest moving this to definitely 1024. That's a safe one. And then this number over here, based on how many gigs you have. So let's say, for example, you have 8 gigs on your machine. I would personally allocate, let's say maybe 2 gigs of RAM, and to do that, to allocate 2 gigs of RAM, just type in 2048, and that's 2 gigs of RAM. If you want to allocate 4 gigs of RAM, that would be 4096, and so on. The way I got to 24 is I multiplied 1024 times 24, and that's how I got to that number. And this is how many megabytes are in 24 gigs. Save it, and that's it. You're good to go. So with those settings changed, your Thinkorswim will now have access to more memory. You will be sure that you have new packages, and hopefully you got to understand Thinkorswim a little bit better. Another thing, very important before we close out this video, please close your Thinkorswim every day. Don't reuse an open Thinkorswim from one day to the other. That is highly discouraged. It's discouraged doing so. So please don't do that. Just close out of it and reopen it the following day or right afterwards. All right. Have a good one, folks. Hope this was helpful.